Ex-NYPD cop gets probation for transporting drugs during Tekashi 6ix9ine investigation. Alicia Robinson, I guess this is a female, the name Alicia, will serve 4 years probation after carrying heroin for the Nine Trey Bloods gang from 2017 to 2018. Former NYPD Sergeant Alicia Robinson will serve no time behind bars after getting caught transporting drugs for the Nine Trey Bloods gang, while rapper and affiliate Tekashi 6ix9ine was under investigation, facing a possible 5-year prison sentence after pleading guilty to the crime. The ex-officer's eyes filled with tears as she received her much lighter sentence of 4 years of supervised probation from Manhattan Federal Court Judge Alvin Hellerstein. And this is Immortal Technique says no accountability, no courtesy, no professionalism, no respect. What the fuck is this? A slap on the wrist while my people are here doing football numbers for much less. This is a disgrace. Judges on the take. And this is the New York Daily News responding, I guess, a former NYPD bus sergeant. Oh, she was a sergeant busted ferrying drugs for the Nine Trey Bloods gang during the investigation of rapper Tekashi 6ix9ine was sentenced to no jail time. Robinson, 41, served from 2017 to 2018 as a police sergeant, patrolling areas of Bedford-Stuyvesant, right? And that's an area with a lot of violence, a lot of drugs, downtown Brooklyn and elsewhere in New York City, while leading a double life. No, she wasn't. You all just didn't want to pay attention, because all these cops, they all have a book, and they're supposed to be writing where they are. I think it's like every hour they're writing their book, So it's like keeping a diary. They write what they're doing and so forth. You all just didn't want to check on her, leading a double life. The single mother of 3 was reportedly at the time dating Nine Trey leader. See that? Here's a woman who is a police sergeant, and she's dating some guy, Nine Trey leader Aaron Bat Young, who is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for his involvement with the violent East Coast gang. Right? So, wow. Isn't that something? Young reportedly connected Robinson with Nine Trey 5-star general. Look at that. You got a 5-star general like in the army. Christian Cruz, estimated to have sold over 2 million worth of heroin and fentanyl, who later testified that the former cop transported heroin for him because she drew less attention. According to prosecutors, Robinson additionally lied to the NYPD and a grand jury about a shooting she witnessed in 2018 between Young and another drug dealer. I know now, and I always will, that what I did was wrong, Robinson said during her sentencing. I take full responsibility for my poor decision making and behavior. I was not thinking clearly and was not thinking straight. Justine Harris, Robinson's attorney, argued during the trial that the former police officer had changed her ways after battling with drug addiction stemming from a traumatic childhood. Gee, so she had a traumatic childhood and she managed to make it onto the NYPD? and took the sergeant exam. You know, I someplace I was working, and no, I overheard a police officer say that, yeah, a lady came up to him, the police officer. I think it was during the let's see, when was this? Last year, during the Halloween parade, and she said, "Oh, my son is a cop," you know, and so forth, sergeant, and he said that the most difficult exam is the sergeant exam. You know, he said after that, like lieutenant, that one is easier. To get to captain, it's not as hard. But he said to make it to sergeant, that's the more difficult exam. I don't know if it's true, but that I remember him saying. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because here they were saying that this woman had a difficult childhood. Right? She had a difficult childhood. She was able to make it onto the NYPD, and she was able to take the sergeant exam and pass. And according to that officer I overheard speaking to that woman at the Halloween parade, he said that this is the hardest exam. You know? Yeah, the hardest exam. So she had a traumatic childhood. Both her parents died when she was 7. She was raised by a series of different loving family members, but very unstable home situation. She was a victim as a child of repeated sexual abuse and assault between the age of 9 and 10. Well, you know what? She could have used that. She could have gone to the schools with that story. The NYPD could have sent her. There's so many city schools, you know, high school, junior high. Because when I was in high school, I remember a police officer came in and you know, talked to us, like one of these talks to tell you stuff, you know, you stay out of trouble. She could have done exactly that. She could have said, "Look, I had a traumatic childhood, and look at me today. I'm a sergeant." Instead, she decides she's gonna be ferrying heroin. According to NYPD Daily News, Hellerstein conceded that Robinson's case was unique. No, it's not. It's not unique at all. Because there was a guy who, during the Mullen Commission, he was carrying and dealing with drugs for one of these, you know, one of these syndicates. Yeah. He was dealing drugs. I'm trying to remember his name. But anyway. So she, her relationship with Young was plagued by mental manipulation and physical abuse. You see that? So with women, usually when everything else fails, it's something like this, or the guy abused you, or so forth. Just like that woman out in California who was convicted recently, who was running that company with the blood samples, and she was charged with fraud and so forth. She said it's all her boyfriend's fault. Yeah. Her boyfriend's fault. He made her do it, you know, like the old saying that the devil made me do it. Yeah. Takashi was granted early release from prison in 2020 after serving 2 years for his involvement with the Nine Treys. The controversial rapper pleaded guilty to 9 counts, including racketeering, conspiracy, weapons offenses, originally facing a 47-year mandatory minimum sentence and a maximum of life in prison, while under protective custody at a private prison in Queens, New York. Takashi was released because his asthma put him at high risk for contracting. Oh, isn't that nice? You know, I remember we had the so-called Rockefeller drug laws, and I think some of those been changed. But I remember there was a young girl, maybe 17 or so forth, and she was given a package to deliver to somebody, and I don't know whether she knew or not, but there was heroin in it. Yeah, she was delivering heroin, and you know what? She got 20 years in prison. She got 20 years in prison for delivering heroin to somebody. Yeah. Okay, so here's the guy I was looking for. His name. They say her case is unique. I'm going to bring this up. Michael Dowd. This says here how Michael Dowd became the NYPD's most corrupt cop. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to show what that lawyer is saying is not true. That her case is unique. No, it's not. How Michael Dowd became the most crooked cop in the NYPD. And I remember this. I think he used to drive like a red, maybe a Ferrari or something like that. I mean, how many cops drive? He was driving maybe not a Ferrari, but it was a sports car, And he joined the NYPD in 1982 and was assigned to the 75th Precinct in Brooklyn. There he began working with drug dealers, robbing their rivals, and selling cocaine. So you see why you can't get rid of drugs, right? Because the cops are working with them. It's like in Mexico, the cops work hand in hand. So this is why it's impossible. I remember one man said, a radio station I used to listen to, and he said he had called the precinct, or maybe I think either the precinct or 911 to report some drug activity. And not long after that, the drug dealer came up to him and told him that he better look out and mind his business, otherwise he'd be taken care of. So he was threatened. Now how in the world are they gonna know that he was the one who called? He didn't give his name. He called anonymously. And so more than likely a police officer informed him who it is called, you see. So it was a police officer who informed the drug dealer, hey, this guy on your block or whatever is calling. So this is why it's nearly impossible to get rid of drugs. So here's Michael Dowd, right? He was assigned to 75th Precinct, East New York. Yeah. That's near Brownsville. A lot of crime, high crime area. 1982. He oversaw the city's second deadliest jurisdiction with over 100 murders per year. But soon, Mike Dowd noticed how much money there was in drug dealing, a stark contrast to his $600 per week salary. See that? He was making $600 a week in those days. In the beginning, he merely stole cash from crime scenes. This is a cop now, stealing cash from crime scenes. But when his activities went unchecked, he began robbing drug dealers and dealing drugs himself. By 1986, this is 4 years later, after he became a cop, right? He started working for Adam Diaz, a cocaine trafficker who made $1 million per week. Wow, that's a lot of money. And this is in the 1980s. This guy is making $1 million per week. Diaz paid Dowd handsomely to tip him off about incoming raids and shuttle his drugs around the city. Feeling untouchable, Dowd spiraled deeper into New York City's criminal underbelly, eventually becoming one of the most corrupt cops in the NYPD. Notice to say one of the most corrupt, not the most, but one. So what does that tell you? That means there's more than one, right? One of the most corrupt cops. As the documentary The 7-5 depicts, Dowd's story involved armed robbery, cocaine trafficking, and abductions without a shred of oversight. See, no oversight, so he was able to do what he wanted. He brought fellow officers into the fold before his partner finally ratted him out. Michael Dowd was born on January 10th. Now they're giving a bio. 1961 in Brooklyn, New York. He was the third of 7 children and was raised on Long Island by an Irish-American firefighter. Right? Dowd was bright, and his parents encouraged him to become a doctor, but he gravitated toward his father's vocation in public service. Dowd took both police and firefighter tests after high school and joined the NYPD because the police test came back first. Can you imagine if the fire tests had come back first? What might have happened? Simple as that, he said. And there's a picture of him there. Dowd accepted his first bribe in 1983. Dowd graduated from the police academy in 1982. He pocketed his first bribe within a year from a man who faced thousands in traffic fines. Dowd told him that he would let him go if he bought me a nice lobster lunch and paid $200 cash, a third of his weekly salary. He ended his shift with a buzzing feeling and never looked back. In 1986, Michael Dowd slid deeper into corruption after 11 officers in the nearby 77th precinct were arrested on extortion charges. It was a huge scandal, and Dowd believed the NYPD wouldn't want to risk repeating it by indicting even more of their own. See? So he got the green light to commit more crime. Remarkably, Dowd saw it as a chance to amplify his illegal behaviors. There was a lot of anger in me, recalled Dowd. These young punks were running around with all kinds of money, and I was broke. Yeah, he was making $600 a week, and by the way, that's $600 before taxes, before they take out Social Security, before they take out federal tax, New York State tax, New York City tax. I think, yeah, he was living in New York City. New York City tax, union dues, SSI, right? Insurance, and probably paying for health care. Probably take that out too. Crooked cops, cartels, and cocaine. So when they do all those deductions, you can imagine how much money he was coming home with. With the crack wars at their peak, Michael Dowd's supervisors spent little to no time overseeing officers who worked in New York's poorest neighborhoods. Dowd shook dealers down with abandon, extorting them into protection payments. See? So now if you're dealing drugs, you gotta, like the mafia, you have to pay him. That's how the mafia operates. If you have a business, The mafia wants a cart for protection. If not, you'll be sorry. And he recruited some of his peers into the racket. Life was wonderful, he recalled. Wonderful, sinful, and glorious. I felt like Scarface, only I was a white Irish boy from Long Island. Look at this. Yeah. Diaz paid Dowd $8,000 per week. Remember, Dowd was making $600 a week, and he was being paid $8,000 per week, while Dowd was making thousands more selling cocaine himself. So he was selling cocaine, and he was being paid $8,000 by Diaz. It didn't take long for Dominican drug dealer Adam Diaz to make him an employee. Diaz used supermarkets in East New York as fronts for his lucrative cocaine operations and wanted an inside man to warn him of outside threats. He bought Dowd out for $24,000. $24,000 up front and a weekly $8,000 salary a week. Man, that's more than a doctor is making in those days. In addition to warning Diaz of raids, Dowd and his crew of cops even began robbing competing dealers for Diaz in 1986. When Dowd's 1987 performance review came in, praising his excellent street knowledge and good career potential, he felt untouchable. And for a while he was. Dowd began flaunting his illegal income by driving, he was driving a red Corvette to work and taking limousines to Atlantic City to gamble. He bought 3 more houses in New York and a condo in Florida. So let me just stop here. You would think that here's a cop making $600 a week and he's driving a red Corvette. Like the song said, a red Corvette. His boss supposed to do something, you know? How is a guy making $600 a week able to afford a red Corvette? Come on. I would sell 28 kilos to the biggest dealers in the area and then sell 7 kilos myself, he said. I was making $68,000 a week. Wow, imagine that. I was making $68,000 a week until I was caught. It was around this time, too, that colleagues warned an officer named Ken Urell to stay away from Dowd. But Urell was drawn to Dowd's mania and became his partner. Together, they protected the daily operation of Diaz's syndicate. Michael Dowd goes to prison. By the early 1990s, Michael Dowd was making so much money on the side that he sometimes forgot to pick up his actual NYPD paycheck. But so see, back in those days, you pick up your paycheck, not like now, you know. Like now, you have direct deposit. But back in those days, people actually got a paper check that you go get, and they hand you your check. You know, checks I guess were brought to the police station, and then you go get your check. Now we live in a different time. You know, now you have direct deposit and all that stuff. But he also started drinking heavily, often on the job, and he started using his own supply. And in 1992, his entire life came crashing down. My wife kept telling me to stop, but I couldn't stop, recalled Dowd. I loved the extra money so much, and I bet his wife loved that extra money too, right? I loved the extra money so much, and I spent it very openly. I thought about getting caught, and then I'll miss it because I was getting away with it for so long, right in front of everybody, and I thought none of the cops would give me up. And there's Michael Dowd right there testifying in September 1993. Little did Dowd know that Suffolk County investigators had intercepted phone conversation between him and a local drug dealer. On May 6, 1992, police barged into the drug house Urel was supervising and cuffed him. Dowd was on shift, high on coke and drunk on vodka, and was arrested on drug conspiracy charges when he returned to the precinct. It soon became clear that the FBI had been investigating Diaz and recorded Dowd and Urel talking about drug deals and payments over the phone. The two partners faced federal and state cases that could see them in prison for 25 years. After being released on bail, they met to reassess. Unaware, Urel was wearing a wire in exchange for a lesser sentence. Michael Dowd was recorded plotting the abduction of a Colombian woman who vanished with $200,000 worth of cocaine belonging to a local dealer. Dowd would be paid enough to flee to Nicaragua in return for finding her, but Urel's tape put him behind bars. In the beginning, of course, I was hurt, said Dowd. I felt betrayed. It still hurts when I think about it, but I got over it. Michael Dowd was arrested in July 1992. He was indicted with 63 colleagues for murder, conspiracy, and drug-related offenses. Dowd's sordid tales shocked the city, and outrage at internal affairs erupted once the public learned that the department had ignored 16 complaints about Dowd over the years, ranging from drug dealing to robbery. In response, the city established the Mullen Commission, same like I said earlier, at restoring oversight. Dowd testified before the commission in September 1993 and admitted that he had considered himself both a cop and a drug trafficker. In 1994, he was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. He was sentenced to 16 years and served 12 and 6 months. Keep in mind the young girl, I think she was like 17 years old. She had delivered a bag to somebody that her uncle asked her to take, and she got 20 years for delivering. I believe it was cocaine. I believe it was heroin. She got 20 years in that, and this guy did all this racketeering, stealing money, working for these drug syndicate, and he was only sentenced to 16 years and served 12 years and 6 months. Isn't that something? You know? Yeah. So that shows you how like a lot of minority ends up in prison. You see? You're a minority, you get more time in prison for doing something stupid or lesser crime. And this is what happened here. Dowd considered himself, a white guy of Irish background, and look at what he got. 12 years and 6 months. And I don't have to go back reading all the corruption he was involved in and the money he was making, like $68,000 or more a week, driving a red Corvette. Since Michael Dowd's release from prison, he has advocated against the very corruption that ruined his life. In 2017, Netflix produced a documentary about Dowd's corruption scandal. the 7-5. And today, Michael Dowd and Adam Diaz operate a fledgling business selling cigars from the Dominican Republic branded after the 75th precinct. Ken Urell, meanwhile, spent not a single day in jail. You see? And Urell was another cop, and he was involved in stuff, but he wore a wire, and he didn't spend one day in jail. After learning about Michael Dowd, read about NYPD whistleblower Frank Serpico, who was shot in the face for telling the truth. Then, learn the true story behind the NYPD's crazy, corrupt 77 precinct. So there you go, folks. And I brought Michael Dowd up to show you what happened. And this sergeant, who's in the news, who was ferrying heroin, she's 41 years old, and says she had a tough childhood. Her parents died when she was 7, and so forth. Instead of going to schools, to NYC, New York City schools, and telling kids, hey, this was my life, and look at me today. I'm a sergeant. I passed one of the tough police exams, and you can do it too. No, she didn't do that. Instead, she was ferrying drugs. You see? And the federal judge let out in 4 years probation. And the young black girl who delivered the bag with the heroin, she got 20 years in prison. Isn't that something? Yeah. Life can be a beach.